So imagine a fully loaded cargo helicopter, right? It's flying a few thousand feet overhead.
Okay, yeah, like a massive machine.
Exactly. You hear that heavy thud of the rotors, you look up, and as it passes by, you realize there is literally no cockpit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There is no pilot inside. There isn't even, a human on the ground controlling it with the joystick.
Right.
It is navigating the airspace, it's adjusting to the wind, carrying its payload entirely on its own. That exact machine just logged its 1,000th hour of flight.
Which is, it is a profound shift. Because for the better part of a decade, the dominant public perception of drones has been that high-pitched, angry bee buzzing sound at a park.
Yeah, exactly. Just some guy with a plastic quadcopter taking panoramic photos of a beach.
Right, a novelty. But the experimental phase of this technology, it is completely over.
So that is exactly what we are digging into today. Welcome to the Red Raven UAS podcast, everyone.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is to just cut through all the technical noise.
Yeah.
We want to understand how policy, defense technology, and commercial logistics are all colliding right now.
Because drones are transitioning from consumer electronics to a fundamentally new layer of global infrastructure.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the United States government is suddenly making some very aggressive foundational moves to rewrite the rules of the sky.
They really are. The Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, has officially launched a major proceeding specifically designed to force the growth of the U.S. drone industry.
Which is huge.
It is. They are looking to slash regulations, drastically speed up the approval processes for commercial operators, and set up these designated free testing zones.
So places where companies can just experiment without constantly waiting on bureaucratic red tape.
Exactly.
Wait, I need to pause you right there, though.
Yeah.
Because the FCC.
Yeah.
Why is the Federal Communications Commission taking the lead on this instead of, the FAA, the agency that actually handles aviation and airplanes?
Well, you've hit on the core reality of what a modern drone actually is. It is not just an aircraft anymore. Fundamentally, a commercial drone is a flying wireless router.
So the FCC cares because it's essentially a mobile cell tower with propellers.
That's exactly it. Think about how a drone operates, right? Every single function requires a constant, massive stream of data.
Right.
You have the control signals going from the ground station to the aircraft. You have high-definition 4K live video feeds being beamed back down.
Oh, sure.
And you have automated collision avoidance sensors talking to GPS satellites. Every single one of those data streams depends entirely on spectrum availability, radio frequencies.
So if the airwaves are congested, the drone just can't fly safely.
Precisely. And right now, a lot of commercial drones operate on the exact same unlicensed radio frequencies as your home Wi-Fi or your Bluetooth devices. So it's crowded, it's noisy, and it severely limits how far away you can fly.
Makes sense.
If the FCC doesn't step in to carve out dedicated, protected, invisible highways in the sky-specific radio spectrum just for drones, the entire industry hits a brick wall.
Because the hardware is ready, but the invisible infrastructure isn't.
Exactly. By opening up that spectrum, operators will be able to fly machines miles away, beyond visual line of sight, with absolute signal reliability.
It's like the early days of smartphones.
Oh, great analogy.
Yeah, like you couldn't have the mobile app revolution, you couldn't have an Uber or an Instagram until the telecom companies built the physical cell towers and opened up the 4G network.
Right.
The glass and metal of an iPhone were essentially useless without that data pipe.
The data pipe dictates the capability of the hardware, and that is exactly what the FCC is trying to build for the airspace right now.
But see, there is a massive caveat in the briefings that I really want to push back on here.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the FCC is part of this broader government push to mandate and support only U.S.-built drones, right? They want to cut down on foreign reliance. But looking at the commercial market right now, foreign systems, especially from companies like DJI out of China, are completely dominant.
Oh, undoubtedly.
They are the global standard for police departments, utility workers, filmmakers. If the U.S. government kneecaps the use of the most popular platforms to force this domestic growth, doesn't that just hurt our own industries that rely on these cheap, effective tools?
Well, you're pointing out the exact tension defining the industry right now.
It just seems counterproductive.
I get that.
Yeah.
The government essentially has to choose between an economic imperative and a national security imperative.
Okay.
Yes, restricting dominant foreign hardware creates a painful, immediate bottleneck for, say, a local fire department or a roofing company that just wants a reliable tool today.
Right. They just want something that works out of the box.
Exactly. But from the perspective of federal intelligence, allowing foreign-controlled data networks to act as the permanent eyes and ears over domestic infrastructure.
Like power grids, bridges, telecommunication hubs.
Right. It's an unacceptable long-term vulnerability. They are willing to force a painful commercial slowdown today if it means building a secure domestic supply chain for tomorrow.
And honestly, that deep fear of foreign-controlled, unsecure technology makes terrifying sense when we look at the intelligence reports about what just happened at a highly sensitive military site.
Yeah, you are referring to the Barksdale incursions.
Yes. For anyone who hasn't caught this in the news, because it sounds completely surreal, over the course of an entire week, coordinated drone swarms flew over Barksdale Air Force Base.
It's wild.
And this is not a standard training facility. This is a premier United States nuclear bomber base.
Right. The details in the briefing are just staggering. We are talking about groups of 12 to 15 drones at a time, repeatedly penetrating restricted airspace night after night.
Just flying right over a nuclear base.
Yes. And the intelligence makes it very clear these were not hobbyists who lost control of a toy they bought at a big box electronics store.
Not even close.
Yeah.
The reports indicate these swarms exhibited long-range control capabilities, and they demonstrated coordinated collective behavior.
Like flying in specific formations.
Exactly. They literally forced a nuclear military base to halt its operations multiple times.
Yeah.
And the absolute most wild part of this entire event, the culprit remains completely unknown.
Nothing. No idea.
Nobody knows who was flying them or from where.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is a massive paradigm shift in asymmetric warfare.
But this is where I get hung up, and I think I'm asking this on behalf of anyone listening right now.
Go for it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How is it physically possible that a premier U.S. nuclear base cannot just swat 15 drones out of the sky immediately?
That sounds crazy, I know.
Are we really that vulnerable? We have advanced radar networks, we have Patriot missiles, we have state-of-the-art base defense systems.
Right.
Why does a swarm of plastic drones get to shut down a bomber base for a week?
Well, because traditional air defense systems were built for a completely different century. Think about how radar actually works.
Okay.
It sends out radio waves and waits for them to bounce off a target. Defense systems are calibrated to look for large, fast-moving objects made of metal.
Like a fighter jet or a cruise missile.
Exactly. That provides a massive radar cross-section. It's like shining a flashlight into a dark room and looking for a giant mirror.
Very easy to spot.
Right. But a drone is tiny. It flies incredibly low to the ground, it's moving slowly, and it is usually made of carbon fiber and molded plastics.
So the radar just doesn't see it.
Well, instead of a giant mirror, your radar is trying to find a matte black piece of cardboard hiding in the bushes. The radar often just filters them out as birds or background noise. You can't just fire a barrage of traditional anti-aircraft artillery, thousands of explosive rounds into the air directly over your own nuclear base.
Because what goes up must come down.
Exactly. All those bullets and shrapnel have to come down somewhere, likely on your own personnel or on multi-million-dollar aircraft.
Okay, so bullets and missiles are out.
Mm-hmm.
But what about non-kinetic options? The briefings always talk about non-kinetic warfare.
Right. Disabling them without bullets.
Yeah, like using invisible radio waves to shut them down.
Exactly. The standard defense against a drone is electronic signal jamming.
Okay.
You blast the area with radio noise to sever the connection between the drone and the person holding the controller.
Right.
Imagine the drone is trying to see a tiny, subtle laser pointer from its operator miles away. Jamming is like turning on a massive stadium floodlight directly into the drone's eyes.
So it gets blinded.
It gets blinded, loses the signal, and usually just lands or falls out of the sky.
But the Barksdale report specifically noted that these swarms were highly resistant to signal jamming.
Which is the most alarming part.
Yeah.
If your radar can't see them, your guns can't shoot them, and your electronic floodlights don't blind them, your defensive options essentially vanish.
So what happens next? If the military is this vulnerable, regulators aren't just going to sit on their hands.
Oh, they absolutely won't. The ripple effects of Barksdale are going to reshape the commercial landscape entirely.
Because they're going to crack down.
Because during a panic, regulatory bodies do not differentiate between good operators and bad actors.
Right.
They don't look at a bridge inspector flying a drone and say, well, they're the good guys, let them fly. They just see airspace risk.
It's just a blanket threat.
Exactly. This will inevitably lead to massive, sweeping scrutiny and rigid enforcement. But simultaneously, it creates an absolute gold rush for the defense sector.
Because someone has to fix this.
Billions of dollars are going to flood into companies trying to solve this exact problem.
Right. If the traditional military tools fail, who is actually building the technology to stop these things? Which brings us to a massive piece of financial news that perfectly illustrates how the defense and commercial worlds are bleeding into each other.
Yes, to Terra Drone investment.
Exactly. So Terra Drone, which is a major Japanese commercial drone company, just invested heavily into a Ukrainian tech firm that specifically builds what they call interceptor drones.
The interceptor concept is just a fascinating evolution. We're seeing technology forged in the pure, desperate necessity of active war zones.
Right, because Ukraine has been essentially the testing ground for this.
Exactly. Instead of trying to use a $2 million Patriot missile to shoot down a $2,000 quadcopter, you send a customized $2,000 interceptor drone to fly up and physically ram the target out of the sky.
Well, wait. If these hostile swarms are resistant to jamming, meaning the airspace is completely flooded with electronic noise, how does an interceptor drone even receive the command to lock onto a target?
That's the big question.
Wouldn't the interceptor just get blinded by the jamming too?
That is exactly where the technology leaps forward. The interceptor drone doesn't rely on a constant signal from a human on the ground. It is built with onboard optical sensors and edge computing, basically an autonomous brain. You get it close to the target, and then the drone's own onboard software physically recognizes the enemy drone through a camera, locks on, and executes the strike completely on its own.
So it doesn't need the stadium floodlight to turn on?
It doesn't care about signal jamming at all because it isn't listening for a signal anymore. It is acting autonomously.
So the interceptor has its own brain. It sees the target and makes the decision to strike without needing a human to guide the joystick in the final second.
Exactly. We are talking about absolute, uncompromising hardware reliability and autonomous targeting behavior.
So if you're a public safety team or a utility inspector 5 years from now, the drone you buy at the store is going to have a brain and signal resilience that was literally battle-tested in Eastern Europe.
That is the direct causal link.
So if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, if the military is solving the hardware problem of making drones completely autonomous and unjammable in brutal war zones, that implies the commercial sector no longer has to worry about the physics of flying.
Right, they just inherit the solutions.
They can just buy that battle-tested technology and focus entirely on scaling up their businesses.
Is that why we are suddenly seeing these massive logistics networks exploding into the market right now?
Yes. The commercial sector is absorbing military-grade autonomy. And because the machines can now reliably fly themselves, the scale of commercial automation is moving way past the experimental pilot program phase.
It's real-world application now.
Absolutely. Just look at the numbers from Manna drone delivery. They just raised another $50 million in funding.
And from the briefings, they didn't raise that money on a theoretical pitch. Like, they've completed over 250,000 actual deliveries to real customers.
Which is incredible volume.
Yeah, they are hitting delivery times of under 3 minutes, and they are using this new capital to aggressively expand into the U.S. market.
250,000 deliveries. That is a functioning, scaled logistics network.
Right.
But to me, the more staggering development in the commercial space is what is happening at the absolute opposite end of the size spectrum. The autonomy isn't just for lightweight quadcopters dropping off coffee. This goes back to that massive machine we talked about at the very beginning.
Exactly.
The legacy aviation giants, Sikorsky and Robinson, just introduced a fully autonomous cargo helicopter.
A full-size helicopter.
Yes. There is no pilot, no cockpit, just engines, rotors, and cargo space. And their autonomous driving system already has over 1,000 flight hours logged, which in aviation testing means this is a heavily vetted, proven system.
This is the paradigm shift playing out in real time. We're transitioning as a society from piloting to managing.
How do you mean?
Well, for the last century, aviation was a 1-to-1 ratio. A human held a yoke, making micro adjustments to keep one aircraft in the sky.
Right.
But the Sikorsky development proves that the autonomy engine doesn't care how big the physical aircraft is.
Oh, I see.
Once you solve the algorithmic challenge of navigating airspace and avoiding weather, you can plug that brain into a 3-pound delivery drone or 3-ton cargo helicopter.
It's like the difference between driving a single taxi cab and managing the entire Uber dispatch algorithm.
Yeah, that is a perfect way to look at it.
The human is being completely removed from the cockpit, whether that cockpit is inside a helicopter or on a remote control in a park. The machines are doing the flying. The humans are simply setting the objectives and managing the fleet.
A single operator managing a fleet of autonomous agents. That is the future of logistics.
Okay, but let's bring this all back down to earth for a second.
Yeah.
Because there is a massive catch to all this incredible autonomous heavy lifting.
Always a catch.
Let's say we have fleets flying themselves, gathering terabytes of data, mapping entire cities, and inspecting miles of pipeline. What actually happens to that data?
Well, data without translation is just noise.
Exactly. So we've built machines that can scan an entire city in an hour, but it's entirely useless to the end client because it's like handing a city planner a hard drive full of binary code.
Right. They can't do anything with that.
The human brain can't read millions of raw data points. If a fire chief uses a drone to map a wildfire zone, but they can't instantly see on an iPad where the safe zones are, the drone was completely useless.
Which reveals the true current bottleneck of the drone industry. What's fascinating here is how that bottleneck has shifted.
Yeah.
10 years ago, the bottleneck was battery life.
Oh yeah, they died in 10 minutes.
Right. 5 years ago, it was the software to make them fly straight. Today, the bottleneck isn't hardware at all. It's human integration.
And that explains the explosive rise of the software and consulting solutions we're seeing in these reports. DJI just released a software tool called the Reality-Free 3D Viewer.
Which is a game changer.
It is. It's explicitly designed to take these incredibly complex, unreadable mapping files and instantly render them into a clean 3D model.
Because turning those massive files into a model you can literally walk a construction foreman through on a tablet is what actually turns a drone operation into a profitable business.
And it's not just software we're talking about, it's entire new companies. We are seeing the rise of dedicated consulting firms.
They exist purely to help public safety departments and corporate enterprise teams build actual effective drone programs.
Because the tech alone isn't enough.
Exactly. The greatest autonomous technology in the world fails if the human organization adopting it doesn't have the protocols, the training, and the simple interfaces to extract value from it. You need consultants who speak both the language of high-tech aerospace and the language of municipal bureaucracies.
So basically, we've solved the flying part.
Yeah, we have.
The machines can fly themselves, they can dodge obstacles, they can even resist military jamming and execute autonomous strikes. Now, the multi-billion-dollar question holding the industry back is simply user interface and corporate training.
It sounds anticlimactic, I know, but yes.
At Red Raven, we work with public safety, utilities, and enterprise teams. And our focus is really on one thing, helping you launch and grow a drone program that's safe, compliant, and actually ready for your mission. We do the consulting, the strategy, and the hands-on training that turns an idea into a real operational tool. So if we synthesize this whole journey we've just been on, drones have officially graduated. The era of the harmless hobbyist toy is over.
Completely over.
Today, these systems are our telecommunications networks relying on FCC spectrum. They are asymmetric security threats, shutting down nuclear bomber bases.
Right.
They are the backbone of our next-generation logistics networks, carrying heavy cargo without cockpits. And there are massive data gatherers that require entirely new translation industries just to help us understand what they are seeing.
That is the ultimate takeaway for you listening right now. Whether you are prepping for a corporate meeting on how to streamline your supply chain, or if you are just walking through the park looking up at the sky.
It's happening everywhere.
This infrastructure is no longer theoretical. It is being built, codified, and deployed right over your head today.
We've got jam-resistant swarms forcing the military into lockdown and pilotless cargo helicopters logging thousands of hours of autonomous flight. It leaves you wondering, once these highly advanced autonomous systems start communicating with each other,
Which they will.
once they start negotiating airspace, routing around weather, and prioritizing deliveries amongst themselves without any human input at all, who is actually in charge of the sky?
That is the big question.
Something to think about next time you see a little plastic quadcopter buzz by.
Thanks for listening to the Red Raven UAS podcast. Visit redravenuas.com for consulting, training, and FAA Part 107 certification, and check out the current special pricing on our Part 107 course.